Her phone vibrated at 3 a.m., and the airline app flashed green before her heart did. Flight 247 had landed. Emma said, "Gate B16, he promised. The arrivals board brightened like a lie under hospital lights. She tightened her scarf, counting breaths, counting steps, counting hours that love had demanded like rent. The crowd broke open and swallowed hope in rolling suitcases and reunion hugs. Emma said, "Daniel, where are you?" And the words tasted like tin. A voicemail bubble hovered, new and unplayed, a soft blue bruise on glass. She couldn't touch it yet. The gate door yawned and spat strangers. A child ran past with a paper crown, and grief shuffled in behind him, wearing a steward's smile. An agent paged a different name, a different life. Emma said, "Answer me," and the phone answered with a dull hum of signal. The board blinked from landed to baggage claim. She waited for his shape to rise from the carousel of faces. Nothing rose. Somewhere a cleaning cart squeaked like a small apology. Emma said, "Please." A text arrived and cut her open with 7 words. "He won't be on that plane tonight." Emma stared at the 7 words until they blurred like headlights in rain, and she hated how relief and terror could share the same seat in her chest. She wanted to ask why, but why felt like pleading with a locked door. Emma said, "Tell me you're safe," and the typing ellipses appeared then vanished like a heartbeat that lost its rhythm. The board's mechanical clack kept time with the ache in her ribs. A woman nearby laughed into a reunion, and Emma borrowed the smile for 1 second, then returned it, unfit. She replayed last night's promises, cheap and bright as vending machine candy. Emma said, "Don't do this to me," while the floor stretched out like a runway she could not follow. The voicemail glowed, patient and heavy, and she imagined it held answers shaped like apologies. She lifted the phone, then lowered it, then lifted it again, like a swimmer testing winter water. Emma said, "Call me now," and the airport swallowed her request with ductwork sighs. Somewhere a door slammed, and she flinched as if truth had walked through. She walked to a vending machine because decisions with small stakes felt safer than the one that mattered. Emma said, "Water, just water," and the bottle thudded down like a gavel. Her phone buzzed again, not a call, just a second message that read, "Weather turned, delays will explain." Explanation arrived late and thin. She could hear his voice in her head, warm and trimmed in charm, and hated how it still fit. Emma said, "I waited through storms before, and the memory of birthdays mist lined up like unclaimed luggage." She sat near the windows where the tarmac shone like wet slate. A plane lifted into darkness, and envy rose with it. Emma said, "I'm here till morning," though morning had already bled into the room. The voicemail hovered, heavier now. She pressed play and braced for impact the way travelers brace for landings, quiet and clenched. The first second was only air, like he had sighed before speaking, as if his mouth had tried to hold him back. Daniel's voice arrived in pieces, spread thin by distance and poor timing. He sounded tired in a way that sleep could not fix. Emma said, "Say it straight," but the recording kept curving away from the heart of it. He talked about a meeting that ran late, about weather that folded the sky, about a missed connection that bruised the night. None of it explained the silence before boarding. Emma said, "Why did you leave me with landings and ghosts?" And her reflection in the glass mouthed the question back. The message ended without goodbye, a door shut without a click. She rewound and caught a rustle. A second voice blurred in the room behind him, a laugh that did not belong to her history. The sound was soft, but it sliced. Emma said, "Who was that?" to the quiet airport. Outside, a service truck trundled by like an answer that refused to look at her. She swallowed air, and it tasted like old coffee and regret. She stood, because sitting felt like surrender, and walked back to the arrivals board as if proximity could conjure a body. Emma said, "I will not fall apart here," and the board answered with a blank stare of pixel light. The second message chimed again as though repetition could make it truer. Emma pictured Daniel walking toward a different door in a different city while the rain stitch shut every path to her. Emma said, "Tell me if you're alone," and the question rang like an alarm she could not silence. A janitor passed and nodded, and kindness nearly undid her more than cruelty would have. She opened a map app and searched hotels near the other airport, looking for an address to hold him accountable. Emma said, "Send me your location," and the typing dots pulsed, then went dead. The hall announced final cleaning. She tightened her scarf like armor and decided to stay until the lights gave up. Emma said, "I can wait," and the night agreed to test her. Emma sat at the airport cafe long after the staff wiped tables and stacked chairs, her untouched coffee reflecting the ceiling lights. She whispered, "I built my world on his words," and the echo felt heavier than the walls. Her phone showed a gallery of their calls, timestamps stretched like lifelines across months. Every screenshot of a smile became proof she clung to. Emma said, "He promised this would be worth it," while a memory played of laughing at screens in the dark, their voices stumbling to fill the gap oceans made. Her heart carried the weight of goodnights, whispered into pillows that cooled too fast. She thought of birthdays passed alone, candles blown out to the sound of delay excuses. Emma said, "I waited because I believed," and belief now felt like betrayal dressed in soft skin. She tucked her scarf tighter and wondered how much of her was lost in trying to keep the distance from swallowing them whole. Her mind drifted back to the beginning, when Daniel had stood at her dorm gates with luggage, heavier than both their futures. He had said, "We'll beat the odds," and she believed as if odds were paper. Emma remembered clinging to his jacket, afraid the bus would steal more than just time. His smile had been sharp with hope, not the blur it became on video calls. Emma said, "I thought distance would test love, not starve it." She kept every letter he sent, folded neatly in a shoebox under her bed, as though ink could anchor a man. She lived through nights when alarms rang at 3 a.m. for their calls, her body tired but her voice awake with devotion. Emma said, "I gave pieces of myself he never had to ask for." The memory of his laughter stitched her together then, but now it cut through like broken glass wrapped in silk. The first year apart had been easier, made of countdown apps and postcards. Emma said, "I loved living inside the waiting, as if patience was a language she was fluent in." She worked shifts, sent him money for tickets he never booked, and defended him when friends rolled their eyes. Her mother said, "Love is not meant to feel like suspension," but Emma turned her face toward the phone instead. Every message from Daniel arrived like a gift wrapped in hope, even when late, even when short. Emma said, "I let silence feel like enough," and silence grew greedy. She lived her life between time zones, adjusting her mornings to his nights, her laughter to his pauses. The truth was that she needed his love to confirm she was worth being chosen. Emma whispered, "I made sacrifices he never counted, and in the balance she lost more than hours." Her confidant had warned her early, had said, "Emma, you're giving yourself away to echoes," but she fought the truth like an enemy. She remembered crying into her pillow while pretending to her friends she was fine. Emma said, "I wanted them to envy what I had," though what she had was a voice on delay. She compared her love story to fairy tales rewritten with airplane tickets instead of horses. Her confidant Lily repeated, "He is not here when you need him," but Emma stitched hope over the holes. She wore his hoodie like armor, its sleeves stained with tears that belonged to nights of dropped calls. Emma said, "I loved him louder than silence could swallow." And still, silence won more battles than she admitted. The anchor of love she carried was heavy, but letting go still felt like drowning. Emma carried the weight of every small victory as proof love endured. She remembered Daniel's surprise video call on her birthday, his voice shaky with poor signal but sincere in tone. Emma said, "That moment fed me for months," and it was true. The loneliness faded when he promised he would be on the next flight, though flights became myths. She hung on to photos of them in happier days, printing them, framing them, letting them wallpaper her belief. Emma said, "I built a shrine out of seconds, because seconds were all he gave." She endured family dinners where questions burned her ears, and she defended him like faith defended saints. Even when her stomach knew the truth, Her heart rebelled against reason. Emma whispered, "Love must survive this," though survival had already demanded too much. Morning crawled in through thin curtains, and Emma watched her phone the way sailors watch a hostile horizon. Daniel said meetings stole my night, and the words felt rented, not owned. She scrolled his feed and found a photo from an office lounge where laughter looked easy. Emma said, "You forgot to look tired," and jealousy slid under her ribs like cold metal. The caption credited a teammate for saving a deadline, and a woman's hand rested on an arm that looked familiar. Emma said, "Tell me who stayed late with you," but the message stayed unsent, trembling in drafts. She imagined him rehearsing excuses while a city purred around him, bright and forgiving. The coffee went bitter before it cooled, and patience curdled beside it. Emma said, "You promised today," and today answered with notifications that were not his. Wind pressed at the window, as if distance had fingers. She stared at the door and felt nowhere to go that wasn't a loop. She called, and the ringback tunneled through miles like a lifeline made of static. Daniel picked up, then fumbled into silence, as if words had to ask permission. Emma said, "Just tell me the truth," and the line coughed, then steadied. He listed delays like beads, each one polished by necessity. Emma said, "I stood at your gate," and she heard his breath hitch like a door on rust. He asked for grace the way some ask for favors they have already spent. Lily texted, "You deserve better," and the sentence cracked something tender. Emma said, "Are we still us?" and the pause was longer than any answer. He claimed fatigue and a room with bad signal that swallowed promises whole. When the call died, she could not tell if he hung up or the world did. She set the phone down as if it were hot, and the quiet burned longer. Bills lay open like small confessions on the table, and she traced dates with a pen that had no ink left for denial. Emma said, "I sent you half the fare," remembering the transfer that felt like hope. The receipt showed a purchase that was not a ticket, a hotel charge in a city that was not hers. Emma said, "Explain the detour," and the room answered with refrigerator hum. She counted hours she donated to a future that kept moving the goalposts. A bank alert chimed, and the sound felt like a verdict. Daniel messaged, "I'll reimburse next week," and the promise wore thin at the edges. Emma said, "I did not ask for change, I asked for you," and the truth stung clean. She lined the receipts like runway lights and saw they pointed away. Her hands shook a little, not from rage but from finally holding the shape of doubt. The kettle clicked off, and she did not pour. Her thumb hovered over a tagged photo that loaded like a slow confession. Daniel stood at a rooftop bar, city lights stitched behind him, and beside him, the woman from the office laughed into his shoulder. Emma said, "Sophia," after reading the caption twice. The tag placed them at a time that stole one of their promised calls. Emma said, "You were busy being elsewhere," and the sentence tasted like iron. She wanted to be wrong more than she wanted relief. The photo was cropped, but intimacy leaks through edges like light under doors. Daniel messaged, "It's a team thing, not what you think," and the denial sounded factory-made. Emma said, "Then why hide me?" and the typing dots danced then died. Wind shoved at the glass, and her reflection looked like someone who had waited too long at ghost gates. She dimmed the screen and room shadows grew honest. She drafted a message that carried every mile they had ever survived and every mile they did not. Emma said, "Either show up or set me free," and the words steadied her pulse. She listed dates, times, gates, and the silence between them, as if building a case for her own heart. Delete tempted like mercy, but she owed herself the sound of clarity. Emma said, "I cannot be your layover," and the metaphor fit too well to ignore. She placed the phone face down and let minutes pass without negotiation. Lily called, and Emma answered because truth likes witnesses. Emma said, "If he chooses me, he chooses now," and the room felt less crowded by ghosts. She hit send and watched the message leave like a small ship that knew its route. The reply did not arrive, and sometimes that is an answer that does not lie. Emma opened her inbox because silence had become unbearable, and there it was, a receipt tucked between newsletters. Daniel had booked a hotel for 2, not 1, the dates stamped over the night he claimed delays. Emma said, 2 keys, 2 lies, her pulse hammering in her ears. She scrolled past his words about weather and found the charge again, undeniable. She wanted to believe clerical error, but the pattern fit too neatly into the cracks. Emma whispered, "You never meant to come home," and her voice landed heavier than she did. The air around her seemed thinner, like betrayal had siphoned the oxygen. She pressed her forehead to the table and felt the weight of wasted devotion. Every mile she had carried became a burden dropped onto her shoulders all at once. Emma said, "I gave you everything," and the truth was that he gave half of himself to someone else. The voicemail replayed, not just once but twice, and the background laugh became sharper each time. Emma said, "That's no stranger," as if naming it gave the ghost a shape. She imagined Sophia's hand on his shoulder, the one she saw in pictures, now stitched to the sound of a laugh not meant for her. The illusion of accidents collapsed into the architecture of secrets. Emma said, "You chose company over truth," and the sentence cracked her mouth dry. The memory of their first promises felt brittle, like old receipts faded by sunlight. Her body rocked slightly, as though her heart had shifted too quickly in her chest. She could not unhear the sound once her ears knew its tone. Emma said, "She was with you," and the words dripped out, fragile but poisonous. The silence after the recording ended was louder than the city outside. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was Lily's voice, steady and sharp. Lily said, "Emma, he's not worth drowning for," and the bluntness split open a flood. Emma said, "But I loved him in ways he'll never measure," her throat closing around the confession. Lily's silence on the line was the kind that held compassion and frustration together. Emma pressed her forehead to the wall, as if stability could seep through plaster. She admitted to sending money, to waiting through years, to living as if her worth was stored in his return ticket. Lily said he took more than time, and Emma could not argue. She realized the receipts told a different story than the man ever did. Emma said, "I thought sacrifice would bind us, but instead, sacrifice only bled her thinner." Her hand trembled, not out of fear, but because the dam of denial had cracked. Emma opened a photo album she once called her sanctuary, and found it transformed into evidence. Each smiling face looked rehearsed, each embrace blurred by hindsight. She whispered, "I staged my own prison," her thumbs sliding over their laughter frozen in ink. She remembered printing them, arranging them like talismans against doubt. Now they mocked her devotion. Emma said, "You were always somewhere else," and the edges of the photos curled under her grip. The fairy lights dimmed as if conspiring with the truth. Every image carried a question mark that could not be erased. Emma stacked the photos into a pile, their weight heavier than the frames that once adorned her walls. Her hands shook, but she did not stop. Emma said, "I cannot live in photographs of ghosts," and the words made her chest both lighter and hollow. The twist of truth landed when Daniel finally called, his voice too calm, too practiced. He said, "I didn't want to hurt you," and the sentence bled hypocrisy. Emma said, "Then why did you?" her voice steady, though her chest rattled inside. He admitted to needing comfort close at hand, needing someone when flights stretched too long. Emma said, "So I was your distance, and she was your present," and the pause confirmed her cut. He stammered about choices, about accidents that weren't accidents at all. Emma felt years collapse into one point, sharp and unforgiving. She said, "You let me starve while you feasted," and the air grew still between them. His silence afterward carried guilt too heavy for denial. Emma lowered the phone and whispered, "I waited at a gate for a ghost, and the world felt permanently altered." Emma bought a cheap ticket that felt like an expensive truth and flew into his city with a carry-on full of questions. She rehearsed lines in the window's reflection, until the clouds let go. Emma said, "You will look me in the eyes," and the vow steadied her. The cab dropped her at his office tower, where glass made lies look polished. She waited in the lobby as evening pushed gold down the street. Daniel appeared with a smile that knew too many exits. Sophia walked a step behind, careful and close. Emma said, We have unfinished business, and air tightened around the three of them. Daniel reached for calm like it could be worn. He asked for a private minute, but privacy had been the problem. Emma said, "No more rooms I cannot see," and the guard pretended to read a clipboard. The elevator chimed like a warning. Daniel glanced at Sophia, and Emma watched the glance answer every question out loud. They stepped outside where traffic hissed like steam from a wound. Daniel said, "Nothing happened the way you think," and the sentence limped. Emma pointed at the dates, at the hotel, at the missing arrivals. She said, "I learned your story by its receipts," and his eyes flickered. Sophia lifted her chin and spoke with the caution of someone tired of whispers. Sophia said, "You were not told the whole thing, but empathy could not stitch this tear." The city leaned in with sirens and streetlight shimmer. Emma said he had 2 doors and chose the one near, and the truth rang clean. Daniel tried to shape regret into a shield. He said, "I broke under the distance, and broke sounded like permission." Emma felt grief harden into a blade she could finally hold without shaking. She said, "Breaking was your choice, waiting was mine, and silence conceded." The argument rose and fell like a storm with its own weather. He said, "I meant to come back," and the words rattled, thin in the wind. Emma counted promises that died on runways. She said, "Meaning is not arrival," and the line cut precise. Sophia stepped back, giving space shaped like consequence. Emma remembered the airport night that scraped her raw. She said, "I stood at your gate until the lights quit, and the memory landed between them like a black box." Daniel reached for apology, as if it were a parachute. He said, "I was lonely, and loneliness felt like an alibi he loved." Emma inhaled until the world steadied. She said, "I was lonely too, and I did not lie," and the street answered with a hard quiet. Somewhere, a bus sighed, and the doors shut. The choice stood bare, without romance to dress it. Emma's phone buzzed, and Lily's name lit the screen like a lighthouse. Emma answered without moving her gaze. Lily said, "Take your life back," and the sentence steadied every bone. Emma said, "I am choosing clarity," and the relief felt like oxygen after smoke. She turned the speaker off and faced what remained. Daniel tried one more time to haggle with fate. He said, "Give me a week to prove it," but proof had expired. Emma remembered wiring money and swallowing birthdays. She said, "Your week already happened, and I paid for it," and Sophia looked away. The city cooled as night took the blocks one by one. Emma did not raise her voice, she raised her standards. She said, "I release you from the story you abandoned," and the words unhooked a weight that had lived under her ribs. The final blow of the night arrived without shouting. Emma said, "Goodbye," and made it sound like survival. She stepped back, and the distance felt earned. Daniel reached as if touch could rewrite the ink. He said, "I never stopped loving you," and love sounded like a word that forgot its work. Emma thought of gates, of voicemails, of laughter that did not belong to her. She said, "Love that does not arrive is a rumor," and the rumor ended. Sophia did not gloat. She folded into the dark like a consequence that knows its place. The streetlight blinked and steadied, as if blessing the decision. Emma turned toward the hotel she booked for herself, a room with one key and honest sheets. She said, "I will go home on my own flight," and the night answered with clean air. The city kept moving, but she no longer chased it. She walked and did not look back. Emma checked into her hotel room alone, the silence folding around her like an unfamiliar blanket. She set her bag down and whispered, "This space is mine." For the first time, she realized she was not waiting for a knock. The window overlooked the city lights, each one a reminder of life moving without her permission. Emma said, "I survived the confrontation, though the ache lingered under her ribs." She ran her fingers along the clean sheets, no lies stitched into their seams. The air smelled faintly of detergent and possibility. She turned her phone face down, a rebellion that felt both fragile and fierce. Emma said, "I do not need his call tonight," and her voice held. The silence didn't bite, It steadied her. Morning found Emma awake before alarms, sunlight cutting through half-open blinds. She said, "Today begins without him," and the statement felt solid. She showered, dressed, and looked in the mirror long enough to see someone she recognized again. The reflection no longer begged. It simply breathed. She ate breakfast alone, and each bite felt like practice for freedom. A message from Daniel appeared, unread, and stayed that way. Emma said not now with steady lips. She scrolled instead to flights leaving that evening, not his, but hers. The choice shifted her spine straighter. Emma realized she had been waiting for years, and now departure felt like the only honest arrival. Emma walked through the city, not as a stranger, but as someone practicing belonging. She visited a bookstore and let her hands rest on spines instead of her phone. She said, "I can hold things that do not break me." The streets hummed with people moving toward destinations that had nothing to do with her heartbreak. For once, she didn't measure time by waiting. She bought herself a small journal, its cover blank and ready. Emma whispered, "A story starts here," and it wasn't about him. A breeze carried the scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cafe, and she inhaled like it was permission. She felt both lighter and heavier, carrying truth but not denial. The city did not ask for her sadness, it accepted her steps anyway. Back at her room, Emma opened the journal and wrote her name on the first page. The ink firm. She said, "I exist beyond waiting," and the letters stood sharp. She wrote about gates, receipts, and laughter that wasn't hers, but the act felt less like bleeding and more like stitching. She paused, letting the silence answer, and for once, it didn't mock her. The phone buzzed again, Daniel calling, but she set the journal on top of the device, a paper shield. Emma said, "You will not fill this page," and the defiance was quiet but complete. She turned to the window where sunlight carved shapes across the floor. She leaned into the light, as if it were a new companion. Evening arrived, and Emma wheeled her suitcase back to the airport, not to wait, but to leave. She said, "This flight is mine," and the words felt like wings. The terminal buzzed with reunions, but her path was departure. She glanced once at the board and the ache of yesterday flickered, then dimmed. She held her ticket like a promise she kept for herself. Lily's voice rang in memory, reminding her of worth not tied to distance. Emma said, "I choose me," and the choice hummed louder than any announcement. The gate opened, not to ghosts but to her own forward steps. For the first time, walking away felt like arrival. Emma watched clouds unspool beneath the wing, and felt the hush that follows storms. She said, "This seat is paid for with truth," and the cabin pressurized her resolve, instead of her fear. The attendant smiled and asked if she needed anything, and she realized she finally didn't. She typed a message to Lily that read, "I'm okay," then deleted the proof because okay was alive on her face. Emma said, "I will land as myself," and the words settled like wheels on clean runway. The engine hum sounded less like distance and more like momentum. Her phone rested quiet in her bag, and silence felt like a companion that knew how to listen. She landed in her city, and the air smelled like familiar rain on warm sidewalks. Emma said, "Home is not a promise someone gives me," and the sentence opened every locked room in her chest. She took the train instead of a cab and watched neighborhoods drift by like chapters that remembered her name. A kid offered her a seat and she laughed, surprised at how light it sounded. She texted Lily, "Come over tonight," and the invite felt like rebuilding with open windows. Emma said, "I will fill my hours with living," and the tracks clicked a steady agreement. She checked her reflection and met a gaze that did not ask for permission to heal. At home, she opened the door to quiet rooms that didn't echo his name. She brewed tea and let the kettle sing for her alone. Lily arrived with groceries and a look that said, "I knew you'd do it." Emma said, "I chose the version of me that breathes," and relief moved through the apartment like fresh air. They cooked simple food and ate standing, laughing at nothing heavy. Lily said, "You kept the part of you he could never carry," and Emma felt the truth fit. She packed the shrine of photos into a single envelope for storage, not for worship. Emma said, "The future can start in ordinary light," and the ordinary glowed. Later, alone, Emma opened her journal and wrote the date with a steady hand. She said, "I forgive the girl who waited at gates," and grace softened the edges of memory. She did not forgive the harm, but she released the leash it held. A notification blinked, Daniel again, and she let it fade without touching it. The night breathed through the window screen, and the city answered with soft street noise. Emma said some stories end without applause, and the quiet applauded anyway. She placed the journal on the nightstand like a lighthouse set to low. Sleep came, not as an escape, but as rest that belonged to her. Morning washed the room in clean light, and Emma packed for a small trip that needed no permission. She said, "I will visit the coast and forget the gate numbers," smiling at the map pinned above her desk. She sent Lily a photo of the ocean forecast and wrote, "Come breathe with me." The phone buzzed once more, then stilled, like a habit learning to die. Emma opened the window and let air move through every corner he once occupied in her mind. She said, "I am done being the layover," and zipped her bag. The final blow arrived as a thought that did not hurt. She whispered the line that would carry her forward.